Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Britt, Kanawha, West Hancock podcast. This is Dan Kroll on September 27th, 2023, and this is episode 90. And this evening, I just learned from the Eastern time zone, Mr. Nick Schmidt. He's up in Michigan. How you doing tonight, Nick?
Good, Dan. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, we were doing this at 7 tonight, and then he's like, it's 7. I'm like, oh crap, that Michigan's not in the Central time zone. So there we go. I'm learning today. Nick is a 2000 West Hancock graduate, former standout athlete, and one of my most loyal podcast sponsors. So I'm excited to do this one tonight. And Nick's grandparents, Verla and Jerry Schmidt, worked for my parents at Mark's Pizza back in the day. So I'm excited to talk about some old memories from downtown Britt. Before we get to Nick, I have to recognize my sponsors that you see on the screen. We have 16 of them tonight. They give a minimum of $10 per episode to make this podcast possible and to give to the Sanger Legacy Fund. So I'd like to thank them and recognize them here quick. I have Swenson's Hardware, the Britt Car, Truck, Bike, and Tractor Night Cruise, Window World of Mason City, Levi Dawn Trucking, Kelly Real Estate, Carlson Drainage, Justin Charbonneau, Daniels Auto Collision in Charles City, some guy named Nick Schmidt, Chuck Boozman, Miller and Sons Golf Cars, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, Jeff and Becky Nielsen, Jay Hiscox of State Farm Insurance, Doug and Kathy Zool, Lifetime Nut Covers, and Triple B's Food Trucks. Again, they give to the Sanger Legacy Fund. The Legacy Fund helps fund our Hall of Fame. We give scholarships to graduating seniors each year. We support any athletic activity or community needs. And then just, again, wherever a need arises, people need money for something that Bob and Linda Sanger were passionate about, like education, athletics, we help make that possible. So if you want to give, go to sangerstrong.com. If you want to sponsor the podcast, shoot me a message on Facebook. Way back when, I always highlight an episode from 50 episodes ago. So that takes us back to episode 40. And Paul Hauge, our former agriculture teacher, FFA advisor, track coach, concession stand guy, did all the things. So if you haven't watched that one from Paul Hauge from about a year and a half ago, make sure you follow that link I'll have on my Facebook posts of this episode later tonight. Let's get some sponsors here, and then Nick is ready to go. Swenson's Hardware is your local independently family-owned hardware store and has been since 1977, located in downtown Britt. Check them out at swensons.doitbest.com. Then we have Kelly Real Estate, owned by Steve and Deanna Kelly. Call them at 843-4102 or check them out at kellyrealestate.net. And thanks as well to Doug and Kathy Zool and Jeff and Becky Nielsen for being long-term sponsors of the podcast. And we have Darren Carlson. He's got that orange logo up there in the top. Carlson Drainage. Give Darren a call at 641-860-0500. And then my buddy Jay Hiscox of State Farm Insurance. Give Jay or Lindsay a call at 843-3563. All right, Nick, here we go. For those of you watching who might not know you, tell everyone about yourself, where you're at. We already said you're up in Michigan, but what's keeping you busy, family, job, all that good stuff.
Well, I think maybe most people probably know my sister Taylor Fermonic, who's married to Coach Mark Sanger. So people may know me more about, from being her brother, just nowadays with kids. I don't know a ton of the younger, kids in Britt right now, just being away for so long, but I've been in Michigan since 2008. My wife and I, Angie, who's actually from Harlan, Iowa, moved to Atlanta, Georgia, right when she graduated from Iowa State. And trying to get closer to the Midwest, we moved to Michigan. And right now, just got an 11 and a 9-year-old, keeping us super, busy now with sports and stuff. I'm coaching football for my son's 3rd, 4th grade, rocket football, tackle. Just stuff like that. We own an Anytime Fitness franchise, and I also work here at Western Michigan University as the director of custodial services here. So,
did you teach your son that stiff arm I saw on Facebook the other day?
Oh, geez, that actually was a kid named Paxton Llewellyn. Yeah, he's one of Riker's good friends. But man, that it's very interesting to see the talent level, I guess. I mean, we didn't, in Britt, we don't start football until seventh grade, organized, and like to see these third, fourth graders and the stuff that they can do and remembering the offense, and it's wild.
Yeah, and just I mean, I teach fourth grade, so I go to little kids football games because they beg me to go, and I went a couple weeks ago, and pretty excited that I was there. And one of my kids made a tackle, and then they were coming off the field. The defense got off the field, and from about 20 yards still on the field to the sideline, he just screams, "Mr. Crawl, did you see that?" It's like they're good athletes and they're like look like little studs out there, but at the end of the day, they're still little kids, and they're just excited that to be out there and people are watching them. That was the highlight of my week a couple weeks ago. Do you follow Harlan football with your wife being from Harlan?
I mean, just, not a ton, not like I do Brit. I'm watching like, now that you can watch all the games, live streaming them. I watch every game almost of the Brit games.
Mhm.
I didn't happen to watch the one that they lost. I just, didn't really think that it was a possibility for them to lose any this year. And so I didn't pay attention. I woke up the next morning and saw the score and I was like, what the heck?
Yeah,
But, Harlan wise, I mean, we just, Angie's parents still live in Harlan. So, they'll tell us stuff here and there. And I don't think they've had many down years
no,
ever. So, I mean, just fully expect them to be in the playoffs and, making a run at a state championship, it seems like every year.
yeah. Over in Britt, we've won 4 titles, 5 runner-ups, and hopefully another one of those trophies this year. And they've won, I think, 13 or 14 titles now, and I think 10 runner-ups or something like that. So it's like they've been in a championship game more than they've not been in a championship game in their playoff history, which is
Yeah,
just
I was looking at some of the state records and stuff, and like just different, you know, they're under a similar situation. I think like there's, that Kurt Blatt, I think his son now is the coach at Harlan,
yep.
and he coached there for
Todd.
all those years.
Yep, Todd. Yep, I met him at Ragbri one year. We were working at the barn for my parents, and he came in had something said Harlan. I said, "Oh, do you know Coach Blatt?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's my dad." So, yeah, yep, you definitely know him. But he's kept the ball rolling. I think he's won 2 of his own titles. So,
Yeah.
all right. So you grew up in Britt, kind of late '80s through the '90s. Graduated in 2000. What do you remember growing up in Britt back in the day? We talked before we hit record about you spent a lot of time, maybe as much as I did, in Mark's Pizza for a while since
Oh yeah, for sure. Like
grandparents
I
worked
said,
there.
my grandma, I felt like she was like the number one employee up there, and always I spent a lot of weekends with them, and so when my grandma would go in early in the morning to make dough and stuff like that, I was up there all the time. I felt like definitely like when it was still Piccadilly Circus Pizza, before it even became Mark's Pizza, we were up there, a ton. But I think like just Brit back then in the 80s and 90s, I mean, it's just, I try to compare it all the time to the childhood I had and then what my son is getting right now. Like, we don't live in necessarily like a super populated area in the Kalamazoo area, and we're actually in like a small town, but the school is so big, and we're in like a neighborhood that has like just 36 houses, and so there's kids his age that he plays with and runs around, but it's not like not getting the same, type of stuff. Like we had like kind of free reign and run of the town, at a very young age in Britt. I remember driving my bike like through backyards and stuff to go over to the Muth house and stuff. My cousins Mitch and Mark, like spent every day together in the summers, like playing, getting into trouble and all that. And like just down the road from me was the Kleins and the Evanses and Rasmussens were all right there on Fifth Street, and then farther down, by my grandma Carol on Main Street, the Eismans were kitty corner at that point. Bergmans were just a little farther down. I just remember being like able to run around and do whatever, hop on a bike, run over, knock on doors. It's like kids these days don't have that opportunity, or at
Yep.
least mine don't. I mean, maybe the kids in Britt, growing up have something like that, but
Yep, and no one cared. We'd play hide and seek in like a 2 block radius of where we lived. Jake Moore and Tyler Swenson and all those guys. We'd be in Steve and Roxanne Savoy's backyard hiding under their trampoline or playset or whatever they had back there. And like they knew we were back there, but no one cared. It was just, hey, the kids are out having fun. So let's be grateful they're doing that and not something else. So
yeah,
yeah.
you had mentioned, I just think about like, cruising Maine and stuff like that. It's just such a totally different, and us having like hobo days and that type of stuff. I wouldn't trade it for anything really.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And we're talking again before we hit record, like I had a great childhood, and there's a reason I was fat. I grew up in downtown Britt, Iowa, on Main Street. Lived above a pizza restaurant and movie store, and when I got tired of pizza, I'd go over to the Red Rooster and like $5 all you can eat salad bar, and I'd probably eat like 5 plates. Get tired of that, go back to pizza. Get tired of that, go across to the Hobnob. You walk in and the smoke would about knock you over, but once you found Dale, he'd cook you some mini tacos and cheese balls and fries and play Pac-Man, and then you'd hop on your bike, go up to the basketball courts behind City Hall, and just it was just go. My boys think I'm this old man who yells at a cloud because I tell them to get outside. And I'm like, back in my day, we'd get on the bike, we'd get out. You wouldn't come home till dinner time or whatever. And they're like, oh, geez.
I just remember like riding my bike like out to the pool and stuff, like crossing Highway 18 before there was a stop sign there. Like I couldn't even imagine letting my kids do that.
Yep.
You know,
that was just the norm. I mean, how else were you going to get out there? So
exactly.
yeah. Who are some of the guys you hung out in high school? Girlfriends, anything that you want to bring up?
Man, I feel like I like all kinds of different ages, of people. I feel like I said, like I'm running around with like, Adam and Chad Klein were just, right next door, so like those guys were right there. And then like all the Eismans, I remember like building snow forts with, Joe, Dave, Steve, like, we're all such a wide, range of ages there. But I'd say like, for the most part, a lot of my good friends, you know, obviously I was like great friends like in elementary school with, Mark Sanger and, Adam Klein, we just all of us like being right there. Travis Benton, one of my best friends, he was the best man in my wedding. But then I hung out a lot with Jake Zool and Matt Zatto and Mike Stripling and, Matt Matern. Like, just, I feel like in a small town, we were all friends. I felt like, there wasn't really a lot of people that, I didn't consider a good friend.
Yeah. Did you ever think your brother-in-law would be Mark Sanger at this point?
Like it's such a very funny thing because, back probably, I don't know, Taylor would have been probably 6 months maybe or something like that. There's actually a picture of Mark sitting in the living room of our house, like holding her, and he's got like, he's like this, he's like, like all like, he's like holding this little baby or whatever, and we're 11 years old, me and him or whatever. And so, it's funny that that picture exists and they're married and now they have a couple kids.
Well, the funny thing is, there was a thing on Facebook once that post your first ever picture with your spouse. And so most people is when they started dating. Taylor posted that picture, and everyone was just like, "You win, like we're done."
Yeah,
like, but no one's beating that picture. That was great. So, yeah. So, speaking of football, speaking of the Sangers, let's jump into. You avoided my girlfriend question, by the way.
Oh well, I think I had a few girlfriends, I suppose, like high school age, whatever. But for the most part, I dated Dusty Smith for the majority of my high school, pretty much like from my sophomore year, like through my sophomore year in college. So it was about 4 or 5 years there. So
yeah, it's just fun for me because you're 5 years older. So when I was younger, we looked up to you guys. Like you were the cool high school kids, the good looking girls and all, they're the football players, and you had your crushes that, the cheerleaders and stuff. So that your era is kind of the group I didn't know but knew of growing up in Britt, So yeah, let's jump into some football here. You got to play for Coach Sanger, a little bit for Coach Perkins. I think he gave it up after your junior year, so you got 3 years of Perkins, I believe, and then Benning came in '99. You excelled in the kicking game as well as offensively, defensively. Your years playing football at West Hancock were 1996 through 1999. If you pay any bit of attention when you hear 1996, when you're talking West Hancock football, that was a pretty good season. 13-0, Class 1A state champions, second of Coach Sanger's 3 titles, 4 in school history. What do you remember jumping into high school football as a freshman? And you have Jeff Sanger, Aldo Ward, Corey Rasmussen, Chad Klein, all those guys as seniors leading the way.
I think it was like from the very beginning. I think it was like that summer. I remember the big talk was winning the state championship, like not being a problem. You know what I mean? Like the expectations were ridiculously high. for that season. I actually was at Mark's Pizza. I remember it either came in or was going out, and like a couple older guys were talking or whatever about that. School was just about ready to start, and I just remember them saying like, "Oh yeah, they're going to start the season ranked number 1 and they're going to win it all." So I mean, it was like I think it had been thought of, since they hit junior high, they kind of knew that was going to be a great team when they, were finally seniors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because that group went runner-up as freshmen, quarterfinalists as sophomores, semifinalists as juniors, and then they won it all. So there was, just like we've had on other teams that have gone pretty far, kind of a target on their back and the expectation knowing that this group could be one of those groups. And now I feel like we're getting that group every year right now. We've been in 3 of the last 4 title games and hopefully another one here coming up. It's just, we've always been good since the mid 80s, but now it's almost like we're at another level of good going through with at the end of Bob's career in life and now with Mark taking over. So how are your JV teams in 96, 97? You didn't play varsity as a freshman, which was pretty normal back then. Still not a lot of freshmen play varsity now. What were your JV teams like during that state title team and the next year?
I don't think we lost any.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I think we might have. No, I don't think we did. I don't think we lost any games either of my freshman or sophomore years that I can remember.
Yeah. Yeah. And usually we remember the losses more than the wins. So if you can't think of any losses, it probably didn't happen.
Yeah, like I said, I think that when you look at all the teams or whatever, especially by the time we got to my freshman year, and it wasn't just, like in 7th and 8th grade, you play like your own 7th grade team and your own 8th grade team. And the grade above me, I mean, even though if you look, I'm sure, we'll get to those years, but like that class above me or whatever, I think was another one of those teams that the expectations were, a state championship as well, because they were really good. I think, maybe the jump to 2A was just a little too much for those, couple of years there. Because I think there was even my senior year, I think too, really good teams, but I think in the 2A realm, just not quite as good as some of the bigger schools.
Yeah, anytime you jump a class, it's a big jump. I mean, there's no doubt about that. One thing, Ben Bergman, you mentioned him earlier. He was a junior on the 96 team that you're a freshman on. We all know Ben for kicking the game winner in the dome against Lamar's Geelan, 17-14, his only field goal attempt of all time. But that year he was 40 of 48 on extra points, kicked off 93 times. But then something that was interesting to me in 97, his senior year, your sophomore year, he was only 17 of 29 on extra points and only kicked off 6 times because you, as a sophomore, took over that duty. You kicked off 48 times. And I'm going to give you a hard time on this one. 1,999 kickoff yards. You really couldn't have done that one extra yard.
I think you could have done that when you just typed it into the book. You could have just added it like it was there.
I was telling people $50. I'll put whatever number you want me to in there, and people are like, no, don't do that. So one more yard.
Bergman or whatever probably could have done all the kicking as well. I mean, we both kicked the same. I think it was just a chance to get on the field, like to get out there. I kicked well, like on JV, and and then just I don't know if Coach Sanger was just like, we'll get you out there to just get you some playing time and get you on the field, really. And Ben at that point, being a senior, he was not getting a lot of rest, playing both ways. So
yeah, that's kind of what I figured. He was both ways at that point and stay fresh for doing what he needed to do. So Mark Sanger also kicked off 5 times that season as well. That 97 team went to the semifinals, lost to Wapsie Valley by 4. You had 4 tackles in that season, ran the ball 3 times for 79 yards. That's a 26.3 yard per carry average, which is, pretty nice little clip to have there, even though it's only 3 carries. Was it pretty much 3 26-yard runs, or did you bust a big one, then have a couple like no gainers?
No, I think there was just 3 pretty like decent runs for about 25 yards, maybe a piece. Yeah. I remember there was one, I think it was Manson. That might have been like a 40-yard run or something like that kind of opened up or whatever, just kind of in that cleanup time.
Yeah.
I think we were probably ahead already, like 40 or 50 to nothing or whatever. And, some sophomores get in there at that point.
Yeah. And how many sophomores would have dressed that season? Do you remember when I was in school? 4, 5, maybe 6 sophomores got a dress. It wasn't the whole 9, 12 team dress varsity. Do you remember what that looked like?
There was a decent amount of us, I think. Probably like maybe 10,
Okay.
something like that, I would guess. I know Adam Klein and Mike Rasmussen, myself. Um,
Harley,
maybe
no, Harley didn't go out for
Harley
football
didn't go out
season.
until he was a junior, I don't think.
That's right. Yeah. I did that podcast with him. I'm like, Harley, I can't find any stats. Did you just play JV? And he goes, no, I didn't even play football till my junior year. That kind of threw
Speaking
me a
of
little
Harley,
bit.
though, I think he's retired now, but this actually is. I noticed when I was going to football practice today, I had his working class Farmer Jim shirt.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yep. I'm still mad at him though. This summer we went to Florida and we decided we were going down to Naples. We were looking at where to stop. We were going to make a 2-day, almost a 3-day trip out of getting there. And it looked like Tallahassee made sense as a stopping point to get a hotel. And so I messaged him a couple days before. He was on an airplane to Iowa the morning we got there, I think, or we got there in the evening. He was leaving the next morning at like 4 something in the morning. So I was like, we really drove from Iowa to Tallahassee, and you're literally on your way to Iowa. So
What are the odds of that?
yeah, I was like, come on, man. I was thinking he'd show us around, but we did go see Bobby Bowden's statue at Florida State. That made it worth it. So yeah, it's that junior season, dome again. Lost to Wapsie Valley, like I said. Junior season, 1998. You talked about this team a little bit, how they had pretty high expectations. Moved up to 2A, went 7-2 and missed the playoffs. First time we did that since 1989. Uh, that team was pretty loaded, but like you said, when you go up to 2A, sometimes being loaded doesn't always equal wins because 2A is just a different level than 1A. You individually, you got some more action running the ball, 35 carries for 223 yards and 2 scores. Both those I found were against Garner. 45-yard touchdown run. I couldn't find anything about the second. I just know he scored. Uh, Stat packet said you had 2. I can only find the one in the box scores. I don't. It's just.
The 45-yard I think that was a pass.
Was it okay?
I think Josh Evans, I remember going out on a pass like from like the wing, you know what I mean, and catching a pass in that Garner game.
Okay, yep. And then I also had that you caught 2 touchdown passes and ran a kickback for a score. So you guys fell the victim in the late 90s, early 2000s. The Britt paper and Kanawha paper barely reported more than the score. I've told that on other episodes before. Doing the record book and the chapter book I wrote, it'd be like Mark Sanger scored 4 times, West Hancock won 46-12, and that'd be like all there was in the paper. And then Coach Sanger didn't keep game by game stats, so I had to find all those in the newspapers, and they just didn't have a sports writer. Then I think Don Hiscox filled in and wrote a little bit, freelancing for the paper just so there'd be something in there eventually. So yeah. So what do you remember about that 98 season? Obviously kind of a disappointment. 7-2 at West Hancock's not considered good, which is crazy
No,
to think about.
no, it is. I mean, really, like we started off. I just remember like playing against. I want to say they were ranked in 3A, Cresco or
Yeah.
Crestwood, and beat them pretty good at Britt. And I don't know. I'm assuming our other game was against Forest City, like usual, maybe like the non-conference stuff or whatever it is. But then, yeah, we went to Lorenz, and they just handed it to us. I mean, it was just a very weird game. Like, I don't think they were necessarily better, but just something about the way that they had their scheme going. Like, we couldn't stop them when they had the ball, and they were just stuffing us on defense. So,
Yeah.
they had one player, I remember, I think it was Troy Nielsen, and he ended up playing like D3 football somewhere, but he killed us. We couldn't stop him, and very weird game. But I mean, then, at the time, I want to say like Emmitsburg was probably ranked like number 1 or number 2, and that's who we lost to at home to give us the second loss. But I think like again, we played them pretty close considering on a pretty crappy like rainy night.
Yeah. And Emmitsburg, of course, powerhouse like Harlan. The Lorenz game was the tough one. Um, I worked at Norwalk for a couple years at the school there, and one of the PE teachers at the elementary coached, and so I was around him, and he's from Lorenz. and he was a senior or junior on that team, and he made sure to let me know about every other day that in 1998, Lorenz beat Britt 32-21 or something like that. I can't remember the score off the top of my head, but
What's crazy, I think too, though, is like I remember like I spent a lot of time in high school, like we'd have like a PE class or whatever, and if you didn't have PE, you'd have study hall, and I'd always get a pass from Coach Sanger to just come and watch film. I'd sit in his office and like watch tapes, and I remember like watching. I don't know if we had like some game, maybe we were getting ready to play like Belmont or something like that, and then like I had to watch the game where Belmont somehow beat Lorenz later on.
yeah,
And just, how did that even? How is it possible? You know what I mean? Like we couldn't
yeah,
compete against Lorenz, and then Belmont ended up beating him in a close game.
yeah. Well, that was my sophomore year. South Hamilton beat us 7-6 in overtime, and then they lost 4 straight games to end the season. Like everyone we had already beaten had beat them at the end of the season. We're like, what? Like you just high school athletics with high school kids, you just never know from night to night what's going to happen. So
I think it is kind of cruddy. I mean, just a little bit when you think about like that a two-loss team doesn't, make the playoffs. I see like sometimes here watching like teams with losing records and stuff like that making the playoffs nowadays. It's like I don't understand how they got the system now, but
yeah, yeah. Oh, my brother's team, his sophomore year up at Buffalo Center, they went 2-7 and made the playoffs when they went to the 32 team thing, and we had to go all the way to Lamar's Galen when they were very good, and the head coach Don Anderson, we're like, what's the strategy tonight playing a 9-0 team? And he goes, get it over with as quickly as possible. Like they're better than we are. Yeah, we want to compete, but at the same time, it is what it is. And then
yeah.
yeah, there's my freshman and senior year, 7-2. A lot of studs probably could have made the playoffs and maybe won a game or two, and end up sitting home because we didn't get it done on one of 9 nights throughout the fall. So, but now it's back up to 32, so it's pretty hard to not make the playoffs anymore. So if you don't make it in a 32 teamer, you don't deserve to be in it. So yeah. So yeah, kind of a bummer season there, 98. You guys rebounded a little bit in 99, but before we get to your senior football season, let's hit a few sponsors here. I have Daniels Auto Collision in Charles City, thanks to Jason Daniels, a 1990 West Hancock grad, given to the Legacy Fund. Check them out at danielsautocollision.com. Michael Ewing of Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, locations in Britt, Kanawha, Clarion, Belmont, and Dow's. Go to ewingfh.com or give Michael a call at 843-3839. Thanks to Nick's former coach, Chuck Boozman. He just messaged me the other day and said, put me on the list. Chuck's a great guy, and I always enjoy our talks with Coach Boozman. New sponsor here relatively recently, Lifetime Nut Covers since 1990 has been providing drivers with high quality American made nut covers and a wide variety of accessories. Check them out at lifetimenutcovers.com. Miller and Sons, quality golf cars for over 50 years, just outside of Britt. Contact Skipper Jim at 843-4132. And then some sponsor I've had for a while, Nick Schmidt, 2000 West Hancock grad. I think you've all heard of him by now. Before we get to your senior year, I just want to thank you personally for giving to the Legacy Fund and sponsoring the podcast all the way through. I'd have to go back and look on my spreadsheet, but I think you started kind of mid to late 2021. You just pretty much said, as long as you're doing these puppies, I'm sponsoring them. So I appreciate you and doing that for me. So thank you. So senior year, 1999, you guys improved a little bit that season, still 7-2 in the regular season, but enough to make the playoffs. Lost in the first round to Iowa Falls, which in 2023 you go West Hancock versus Iowa Falls. There no way, because we're 8-man number wise playing an A. Iowa Falls Alden is a 3A school, so kind of different how the demographics have changed a little bit. You were the second best running back yardage wise on the team that year. Harley, Jason, had 756 yards. You had 456 and scored 7 touchdowns. You even threw a pass for 6 yards. I'd kind of like to know, was that one of those toss pass plays we'd throw out there once in a while in a desperation move?
I think it was probably back to Adam Klein. I'm guessing it was probably like a 327, like throwback to the quarterback or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's always fun. Like, yep, I completed a pass.
I think I was 1 for 1 in junior high. I think I did heave one up like without even seeing where it was going, and Kurt Redema caught it for a touchdown. So
Nice.
that was either 7th or 8th grade.
Yeah.
In that season though, we went to Cresco and played, and we lost that first game, I think.
Yeah. So
In
non-district.
non-district play, and I think the only one then we ended up like losing in the season was at Emmitsburg in another close game. I remember I kicked an onside kick at the end, and Mark Sanger recovered it. We only had a little bit of time left to
Yeah.
score. I think we only had like 30 seconds left at that point.
Yeah. And
Obviously, we couldn't pass.
Yeah, we weren't a potent passing team like we can kind of say we are today. Obviously, we're not chucking it around 25 times a game now, but it's opened up a little bit. You also caught 8 passes, so that was probably the majority of the receptions for the season, 111 yards. You were 20 of 29 on PATs, 2 fumble recoveries, and 51 tackles. Overall, 4 years of varsity. You obviously didn't play all 4 years on the varsity, but your 4-year stretch, you guys were 37-7 with the state title, semifinalist trophy, and a first-round trophy. So 3 out of 4 years, you came home with some hardware. You ran for 765 career rushing yards, which when I put these notes together was good for 54th all time in school history. A couple kids this season have since passed you or will be passing you in the next couple weeks. One thing that I think is cool about our football history is guys don't care if people pass them on the ranking list or the record book. I've met people, and I've said this on podcasts before, there's people who get ticked off when future players after them beat their records or pass them. I'm like, don't you want the next team to be better and to win? Like, it just blows my mind. So, yeah. Kicking stats. This is where I think it's fun because we've not been much of a kicking school. We usually go for 2 most years. So your 48 kickoffs in 1997 is 13th all time. Your 17th in season kickoff yardage, which was 2,143 yards in 97. Your 11th all time in season kickoff average of 48.7. In 1999 was when that happened. Your 4th in career kickoff yardage with 5,730 yards. You're tied for 2nd for most PATs in a game with 7. 8 is the record. You made 7 against Clarion Goldfield in 98 to get to that spot. Your 8th in season made PATs with 25 in 1998. Your 6th in career made extra points with 45. Gerardo Ibarra has the record with 87, and there's some games missing. That number is probably actually higher than that. Your 7th all-time in career extra point percentage. You also made 1 field goal, which for the Sanger era was a school record tied with like 10 other guys. And then when I expanded the record book to after Coach Bob Sanger and before Bob Sanger, there was a guy named Gordon Armstrong who made 8 field goals between 1922 and 1924. So he shattered your guys' record of 10 of you making 1 field goal. So Jay Hiscock's on the radio and the live stream likes to bring up Gordon Armstrong every once in a while. So talk about Coach Perkins, Coach Sanger here a little bit, and then we're going to talk about track and baseball, and then some fun family stuff with the people I know.
It's so funny that you mentioned those kicking stats. Like, I just felt like that was like something like extra I did. I never like considered there would be a stat or anything to consider. It was just like something that like I thought was fun to do or whatever. So I just told Coach like I want to kick, right? And no soccer style, just kicking it straight on, and I don't know. I enjoyed it, but it's funny to hear the stats back, I guess.
Yeah.
It was just a good like time, I think, to be in Britt, like that time frame or whatever, like all the people that like you could like look up to, I mean, like I think when I was in kindergarten, I remember like you just start going to all the pep rallies and Coach Perkins being Dr. Spirit, and like that's all I cared about. I remember going, like getting off the bus or whatever after school, and I was right over to football practice. Like I spent every night during the football season, waiting for my turn to be a manager, So by the time I had, I think it was, I was like fifth grade, I finally got to be, it was me, Mark Sanger, Adam Klein, and Steve Eisman were the varsity managers. In 90, I want to say it was 90, it would have been the year after like Rick Sanger, after Garner won the state championship.
92.
That next year. So I think it was like Jared Haxton and like Stacy Gopel. I think they were the seniors then. But I was a varsity manager then. And so just, riding the bus with the team and stuff. And I mean, we heard every pregame speech by Coach Sanger and Coach Perkins, every halftime speech. Like, it's just amazing to be around it for that long. I mean, I remember I probably cried, I think, 2 times in West Hancock football, and it was when Dan Cooper caught that pass in the playoffs to get us to the Dome,
93.
and then like after my senior year losing at Iowa Falls, it was like the only 2 times, and I just remember like that chance to go to the Dome. I still like have that. There's a plaque you get when you go down there, that has the team photo on it,
Yep.
and I'm like, kneeling on one of the corners there. It's hilarious to look at because then it's just all those people, Nate and Ted Smith and John Gellner and like all those guys,
larger than life as a kid, like now you come back and see everybody and they're just cool dudes to hang out with. But as a kid watching them play high school ball, seeing Coach Sanger, Coach Perkins, it was like a larger than life experience, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, like I said, being able to have that at such a young age. I mean, that's all I think like a lot of Britt kids, or at least during that time frame, like that's all we thought about, like, is our turn, right? And then like being around it like I was able to be like as a manager and like getting to witness all of that, riding the bus with the team and going to breakfast. Like I'd get picked up at my house like first thing in the morning by I think like Jeremy Prignance or like Dan Cooper pick me up and go to the Hobo House on Friday mornings before games. It's like just a pretty cool experience or whatever. But I mean, I spent a lot of time at the Sanger household as well, growing up and spending the night out there and stuff. And like the only downside to that was like it was a Saturday night, spending the night. Bob went to St. Patrick's Church too. So like I'd actually have to wake up and he'd take me to church. The rest of his family, they went to the Methodist church, but Coach Sanger went to the Catholic church. So
no excuses. You're going.
No, I know, unless you could go like Saturday night. But
yeah, and now your sister lives out there with Mark and creating their own great memories with their girls. And speaking of, those are some busy little girls they have.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't make it back enough to like see them. They grow like so much, like in between the times I get a chance to see them. But yeah, they're in for it.
They keep them busy, that's for sure. So you also ran track, played baseball. Justin Charbonneau just a couple days ago said, "Hey, I'm sponsoring Nick's episode," and he gave a decent amount to say thank you to you and a couple other buddies. He said I had to mention though about when you guys I think would go to Mason City to hit baseballs in the off season, or
probably you and I. We went to the University of Northern Iowa. Me and him and Adam and I think maybe Ray Zamago. We went to like
I think those are the 4 you mentioned.
Yeah, we went to it was like a league. Like they kept score. Like the way you were hitting inside these cages, based on where you hit it in the cage, like they scored it. It was cool because we were like going up against like the big school kids, like that were probably one sport athletes just playing baseball, But I don't think we did well against them, but it was still fun.
Put the time in, yeah. Because I mean, again, we've never been known as a baseball school. There's been some pockets of good years here and there, but most guys were getting ready for football season in the summer and track in the spring, and a lot of wrestlers in the winter and basketball as well. But who were your baseball coaches in high school? Timmerman had been out for quite a few years. Who would have you had for baseball?
When I was a freshman, I think it was my freshman or sophomore year when Sickles left.
Was it Zeisman? I remember Zeisman.
No, I mean I think I only had Sickles and then Mark Eisman.
Was it Mark at the time? I can't remember the years.
Yeah, but when I was a freshman or whatever, you play after your freshman year of school, you play your first year of high school baseball.
Yeah.
At that point, but I remember at the very beginning of the season or whatever, I was like trying really hard and trying to show Sickles how good I was, I remember, and he basically was like shaking his head. He's like, nothing you can do. He's like, I'd never have a freshman play varsity. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm still gonna like try hard and do whatever you say, right? And so I'm running around there, but like probably like a few weeks into the season or whatever, I don't know what had happened or whatever, but next thing you know, I got a I got a varsity jersey and I'm dressing for varsity to start. And then by the end of the season or whatever, I'm starting pitching. So it was just a pretty cool thing, I guess, to accomplish at that point, after him telling me that it wasn't even an opportunity.
Yeah.
Or there was no chance of getting there.
Yeah. I was good friends with Chad Eisman, Mark's son, and I've gotten to be friends with Josh over the years. So I remember going to a lot of baseball games where Mark was the head coach, and he was just he made the kids were fundamentally sound, and then he was just so not basic, but like just here's what we got to do, fellas. It seemed like he was just short and to the point, and here's what we need to do. I always appreciated that from Mark. What do you remember about Coach Eisman?
I mean, I think he's just a good like baseball guy. Like he knows the sport, like I mean, I feel like we were always just like just short of having like really good teams in baseball just because you don't get the participation. A lot of kids just do other things in the summer, and we probably had a lot more athletes that could have played that just never did.
Yeah, yeah.
I think like
we're the only state that has summer baseball. So
yeah, here in Michigan, it's crazy because like I'm always shocked that like their season's getting done, but there's so many like travel teams and other things going on. Kids are still playing baseball in the summer. It's just not school affiliated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different world, and it can either hurt or help you because you can be all in for it or you don't get the participation, like you said. Athletes
But
like
like I
crazy.
was saying, I think like my freshman year was like the farthest we had ever that I in my 4 years or whatever made it. We beat Garner, I think, in the first round of districts or whatever, and then we beat North Iowa, and then we were actually at Eagle Grove against Fort Dodge St. Edmunds and lost in extra innings.
Okay.
It's like seniors then would have been like Chad Klein and Joe Eisman and Corey Rasmussen and
yeah. So you would have played
with
my cousins at Buffalo Center, Brett and Scott Van Tiger.
Yeah.
The Van Tiger boys, they were they're my double cousins. My mom's brother married my dad's sister, so we were cousins on both sides of the family. So yeah, they were good athletes. Baseball was one of their favorite sports. So what about track? What'd you do on the track in the spring?
I mean, like I guess I was somewhere just in the middle. You know what I mean? I wasn't necessarily like excelling. I know based on how like different individual, who runs what and like relays and stuff. I always ran 2 or 3 events and long jumped every meet. But back then, you qualified like as you went.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like what you get at the state tournaments, your state meet is different than what you run throughout the year. I'd say like top achievement. I want to say that we had broke the 4x1 conference record at the meet when I was a junior, I think and I led that off. I think it was Corey Trineri and then Mike Stripling and then Jason Harley anchored it. But I don't know how long, if that record stands still, I doubt it. But it was interesting because we had Zach Osterkamp, who was the fastest one on our team. And like, I don't know if it was just because he had already had too many events or whatever for that meet at conference. And I led off the 4x1, but that's typically what it was. Like if he was running open 1 and 2 or whatever, maybe he ran another, thing. But Coach Sanger bounced us around and moved things around all the time, based on like what the meet was.
Yeah, he knew how to get extra points everywhere. That's how he won so many meets, was just, I know if I do this, I can get 2 more points out of that, and then that'll add. Yeah, it's just crazy. And then what's crazy to me is I would hate to be in the lane next to Mike Stripling in a 100-meter dash. Dude was a monster. Just big dude that could move. And
he and I were just together this weekend. He flew into Pittsburgh and I picked him up and we went to the Iowa Penn State game.
Oh, okay.
And wasn't very good outcome for us. It was a great experience in Happy Valley.
Yeah. Oh, going to that whiteout game would be pretty neat.
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, a good environment. They had good fans. It was a lot of fun.
Were you wearing white or did you wear your Hawkeye stuff?
Oh man, we were that hurricane or whatever. I forget what the name of it was like just making landfall or whatever, and it was rainy and cold, and I had probably I think like 4 layers on or whatever, and I had a big black Iowa Hawkeye sweatshirt on the outer layer.
They give you a hard time, fans, or were they all pretty
No,
cool?
I mean there was I mean all the Iowa section where we could see like up in the one of the corners or whatever was all black too.
Yeah. They just didn't put that on TV. They tried to make sure it
Now
looked
they hit them. Those people were way up in the upper deck, like hidden. We were more like 50-yard line on the visitor side, but we were up pretty high. So
yeah, it'd be a cool experience, that's for sure. Yeah, I kind of watched that game and then I'm like, I'm gonna work on podcast notes because it's just not
they
worth
hung
your
in
full
there for a
attention.
little bit, and then just nothing went their way, and then they just came out flat after the halftime. So
Yeah. You didn't turn into a Michigan Wolverine fan or anything that living where you are you?
never.
Okay,
I
good.
even I even work at Western Michigan University, and like I had a few texts. Like Mark Sanger had texted me, he's like, "Do you have like a conflict here? Like, who are you rooting for?" And I'm like, without question, I'm never going to root against the Hawkeyes ever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean,
Say
it
if
wouldn't
you
matter.
we'd have to end the podcast here if you said go Wolverines or something. So yeah, we
It's
don't want
crazy
that.
living here, being a Twins fan, a Vikings fan, and it's like the good news is that I'm like in an area where they play a lot of games here, right? So if I want to catch the
Yeah.
Twins, it's quick, easy drive to Detroit. Same with Vikings games. So,
How far are
um,
you from Detroit?
I mean, it's probably an hour and 45 minutes or whatever to get
Oh,
to
yeah.
Ford Field, maybe a little further.
It's like going to Des Moines from Britt, pretty much. So
Yeah, it's not. I'm like Kalamazoo, where I live, is about 2 hours to Chicago and 2 hours to Detroit. I'm like in a good spot in the middle.
does Kalamazoo have like a Division III college in town too?
Yeah, K College is just my son actually plays their our home games are played on that field.
At what was
Um,
the college?
it's just called Kalamazoo College.
Kalamazoo. Where's Hope? Hope College.
Hope is in Holland.
Holland. Okay, we
That
went
would
up
be
there.
like that's the central, what, sister college?
Yeah, be
Because
like
Holland, Michigan, and where Hope's at, and it's definitely like Tulip Festival and all that. I actually, Tony Ridema, I think maybe even Kurt Ridema live up there now.
I know one of them lives in Michigan. I've sent a book out to him. So yeah. We
Yeah.
played Hope in '07 when I was at Central, and for some reason I had Kalamazoo in my head, but that's in their conference. So
You reminded me, I don't know what made me think of it or whatever, but about my senior year of football, going back to that. I don't know how many teams have done it before or whatever, but my senior year, I don't think we'll let a team score at Britt
yeah,
that
you're.
year. So I think it was
Um,
like a shutout year. So that was like when I saw that stat, I was like, that's something, at least, not winning a playoff game, but making the playoffs and then not letting anybody score at Britt, which I remember being huge because as a group, we always struggled against Garner. Seventh grade, eighth grade, it was always like a 2-point game or something like that. And then to like have them come to Britt, I think it was on like a homecoming night for us or something, and we beat them like 40-0 at Britt. That felt
yeah,
great.
you had 5 games in '99. You didn't give up a single point at home, which is really. I mean, you can have the best defense in the state and still give up points because if you're up 48-0, you're putting the backups in, and then the other team keeps their starters in, and we gotta just get a score, and so they score, and then you get 6 points on the board. So yeah, that I think John Schubert and I were talking about that once. I ran into Sports Page in Indianola to get something to eat to go, and John and his son were sitting there waiting for a football game that his son was playing at the high school here in town, and so he had about an hour to kill. So him and I started talking, and that got brought up. I remember he's like, "Did we really not give up a point my entire senior year at home?" I said, "Yep, you're right." So, yep, always something fun to talk about with West Hancock football. I'm gonna hit a few sponsors here, and then we're gonna talk a few more things and wrap it up. Triple B's Food Trucks, owned by Brett Kozlerich, my student teacher from a few years ago. I'll be working there the next 3 Saturdays in Indianola. Best tenderloin you've ever had. Give Brett a call at 641-895-0885 if you want to book him for an event. Levi Don Trucking and Britt. Levi is so generously is always giving to the Legacy Fund through the podcast. Give Levi a call at 641-860-0077. Thanks to Jared Wingert, owner of Mojo Productions and guy who runs the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise. for sponsoring the podcast. Go to brittcarcruise.com to learn more. And then our last sponsor of the night is the Showalter family in Window World of Mason City, owned by Joey Showalter. He passed away a couple years ago. His wife wanted to honor him by sponsoring the podcast. Wrestling real quick here. You wrestled for 2.5 years. As a sophomore, you were the team MVP and ended up giving up the sport because you told me earlier cutting weight had just gotten to be too much. Talk a little bit about wrestling West Hancock.
Well, I mean, definitely, like I said, I think kind of the reason, I guess I would say that, not wrestling the full 4 years or whatever, I think like it's a tough thing, like looking back, I guess, being older and more mature, like at the time, being from Britt and loving football, and then like the idea of cutting weight just like didn't make sense to me, like wanting to like lift weights and grow. And I don't know if that just played a mind game a little bit, like definitely one of the hardest sports there is in terms of like what you're doing to your body, but also at the same time just mentally. I mean, expectations were always so high for myself, like I didn't, you know what I mean? And so cutting the weight and not liking to lose, I mean, just, talking to people and like, when they're saying, hey, like this is your year, like definitely, getting down to state and all that stuff, it was just constant pressure. And like now, like looking back, I'm just like, man, I wish I would have actually stuck that out, right? Like the idea of giving it up, probably one of the biggest regrets, that I have. I think I was something like 32-6 or 32-8 or something like that my sophomore year. I said lost in overtime to go to state at districts, and then started off really good my junior year. Maybe like a loss or two. I was like 16-1 or 2, 18, something like that. But just something at that point, middle of the season or whatever, just like wasn't sitting well with me with cutting weight and the pressure, and just, I don't know what you want to call it or whatever, but it was just not a place I wanted to be, and ended up giving it up, which, like I said, probably like looking back now, like the mentality I guess I have now or whatever, like I never would have done that. If I had an opportunity to go back, I would have stuck it out and seen it through.
It's so hard as when you're in the moment and young to think logically sometimes, or to understand, the regret that's going to come later. Like, well, even my 3rd grade son right now, Quentin, I have twins. He was upset today because kids weren't passing him the ball playing football at recess. And he's like, I don't think kids like me, yada, yada. And I'm like, trying to tell him, like, it doesn't matter, but someday you're not going to be in 3rd grade. You're going to be out of here. It's not going to matter what kids were nice to you in 3rd grade, but when you're in the moment, it doesn't matter what your dad's telling you. You're going to think about 15, 20 years from now. It's just, when you're in the moment and you're young and still developing, it's tough to think outside of that. So, did you have Heeman and then Benning for your coaches? If I have my timeline in my head right.
Yeah, I think De Leon had just left a few years before that, I think, and then I think Heeman was both my freshman and sophomore year and junior, I think. I mean, we always had, I know like Ron Finch was around a lot, and Billy Dahlman, and Benning was definitely there too.
Yeah,
at least for my sophomore or junior year.
Yeah, and then they flip-flopped for a year. Heeman went from head to assistant. Benning went from assistant to head for, I think, 1 year. And then Heeman took on some administrative jobs, and then Benning took over for, I wrote a book about this, I should know, but like 4 or 5 years, I think. And then he left to go back home with his wife there where they grew up. So, yeah, but either way, part of a pretty tradition-rich program, Britt West Hancock Wrestling, and Mark's the head coach, so I'm sure you follow it a little bit. And
yeah, I went down to the state tournament this year. I drove through the snowstorm from Michigan to there to watch the state wrestling tournament. Still really, like I said, I enjoy it. My son, just started his first year of wrestling last year, and he's pretty good. He's like naturally a little skinny kid, though. I don't think he'll ever have to cut any weight.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
He'll be lucky. I think he'll be lucky to be 100 pounds probably by the time he's a freshman. So he'll get right in there at the 103-pound division.
I've gotten to be friends with like John and Brent Hagen. They wrestled like 98 pounds as sophomores. I'm like, guys, I was 98 pounds in kindergarten. Like I was 195 as an eighth grader, and as tall as I am now, I just can't imagine. That's just crazy to me. It's just kind of jealous because that'd be nice. I'm trying to cut weight right now just to be healthier and going on a trip. And I'm like, it's not easy doing this, man. Like 37 years old. So, but I blame pizza and Mark's Pizza for a lifetime of, slight obesity. So, good segue into Jerry and Verla. Your grandparents were two of my favorite people. Growing up, Verla worked for my parents. I don't know if she had like full-time status because I have no idea what my parents would have paid a employee. I know I got paid like $1.50 an hour when I worked for them. I don't know what the title she had, but her and Blanche Cheezick were two of my parents' most loyal employees. And then Jerry would help out as needed or just come to hang out and get free pizza. I always feel like that was like, at my school, I get a salary plus benefits like health insurance. If you worked at Mark's Pizza, your benefits were unlimited pizza and movie rentals. So it was kind of a big deal to get to work for my parents. I felt like back in the day. My favorite memory of Jerry was I can't remember the year. It was when the Bengals were in the Super Bowl, and Icky Woods was the stud running back for the Bengals, and so he had that Icky Shuffle dance. And so my dad had like a promotional where Jerry would deliver pizzas to people on Super Bowl Sunday, and every time he delivered a pizza, he would do the Icky Shuffle for the person he was delivering to, and I got to ride along. So Jerry and I had like 20 pizzas in the back seat. He had me in the front seat. Pretty sure neither of us had seat belts on. It was kind of cold, icy, snowy night. And we just drove around Britt delivering pizzas. He'd get out, knock on the door, do his little dance, Icky Shuffle. And
what were you, like 4 or 5 years old?
I couldn't have been very old, but I still remember getting in the car. It was probably not 8, 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, should I be in bed? But here, yeah, it was great. Hattie Speaker would have been our babysitter. My parents must not have hired her that night and just said, he'll be fine. So, yeah. Talk about your grandparents a little bit because I really enjoyed them. They were a big part of my childhood and had a lot of fun with them.
Well, like I said, I mean, a lot of my memories growing up was spending a ton of time up there. I felt like my grandma was like, felt like she had ownership, you know what I mean? Like, and that's how she treated the job. I mean, she was a serious thing, but both her and my grandpa, like, to me, they were always like old and retired, you know what I mean? And so like, it was almost like they were doing something like after, like, it was like a retirement job that they were like fully dedicated to, you know? And I remember just like, that's kind of how they treated it, you know? And my grandma always like seemed like she had like a huge responsibility to be there and make dough. And I don't know. I just remember them taking it really seriously, and my grandpa like always doing like extra things around, whether it was like he's kind of a jack of all trades and could like build anything. And I remember him just like making different stuff to like take up there, whether it was like shelving or I mean, just weird stuff, like that he was always like working on. But like I said, hobo day time would come around or whatever, and I remember just being up there like the whole time. So you guys would set up, like outside of there and selling by the slice, and you know.
Yeah, your grandpa he made desks for my sister and I for Christmas one year. I can still smell those desks just thinking about them. They had that stain, smell to them. And he made a big dollhouse for my sister for her Barbies, and that was like 6 foot tall. So my parents were always not only paying your grandma to work for him, but paying your grandpa to make projects. He would have done it probably for free. He was just that type of guy. And when wood was probably crazy cheap, unlike it is today, it was like, I got plenty just sitting around. Here you go. But Verla, she hated it when I dribbled my basketball in the restaurant. I would go up and down the movie aisle, just bouncing my ball. Her and Aaron Brown probably almost killed me a few times. I do remember once either her or Aaron took my ball and chucked it across Main Street towards the Hobnob. Now I look back on it, I'm like, that's the busiest street in town. There's cars constantly going up and down there, but they were like, I don't care.
They were done with the ball.
Let the ball get run over, let the kid's foot get run over or something. But
I was just thinking about, like I said, like going back to like childhood and growing up in Britt, and like a lot of memories down at their house, especially like in my grandpa Jerry's garage, because like he was always woodworking, doing something out there, and had all the tools. And like I remember like using like his like, I don't know, like some like sort of like anvil or like vice grips type thing or whatever it was. I just remember like him just giving me a bunch of nails and like a hammer and just like put them in there, and like so I was always like practicing and doing that stuff. And it made me think like I don't do that stuff with my kid, or kids. And I'm thinking like, will they ever be able to, do those type of manual labor type things like that? Like I said, the things that interested them right now, or whatever, with whether it's social media or their iPads or whatever it is, Fortnite, you know, like we didn't have that opportunity. And so, like I said, having a grandpa who was like taking me out and showing me how to use a saw and a hammer and all that stuff, it's like maybe a lost, you know, skill.
yeah, it's not as common as it used to be. I can't do any of that stuff. I am the least handy person in the world, and I probably had the opportunity to learn. I just never did. But um, your grandma always kept our birthdays on her calendar. Uh, and then when Jerry passed a couple months ago, you sent me a couple pictures of me from like kindergarten, first grade, whatever it was, like 25, 30 years ago. They still had pictures of my sister and I and my brother in their house. One of my favorite memories was just probably 2 years ago now. Um, I always go to Peg Eisman's house for the Hobo Day parade, hang out with all the Eismans, glutton for punishment, I guess. And your grandpa would always go across the street at the Armstrong house and put his chair down. And Brenda would show up. And I'd always walk across the street before the parade and talk to Jerry for 10, 15 minutes. And how long's your grandma been gone? What year did she pass? Do you remember?
I'm gonna say like 2016 or 17
Yeah,
maybe.
so it's been a while, a handful of years. And a couple years ago, Jerry, we're talking, and he goes, "Hey, make sure you wish your sister a happy birthday today." And I was like, "How do you remember my sister's birthday?" And he goes, "It's on my calendar still." That just floored me. I was like, "Wow!"
Mm-hmm.
Like he goes, "Well, Verla would always put your birthday, your sisters, your brothers, your parents, Blanche's, some people from the restaurant still." And he goes, "When she passed, I just couldn't not do it." Like he got the next year's calendar, and he goes, "I just copied over everything from one year to the next." And that meant a lot to me. That's something I'll probably never forget. He was a good dude. And
It's funny you mentioned calendars though. When after my grandpa passed away, and I was down there at the house with my aunt Brenda and Barb and their daughters Nikki and Macy, and we were going through some stuff, and we came across a bunch of these like old calendars that my grandma had, and like it was really interesting because she would like write notes like on each of the days, like stuff that happened that day.
oh,
So it was like hilarious things. Like I mean, I was like someone like talking gossip or whatever. She like made note of, like she made note of like something like Nick's being a pain in the ass today. Like just interesting things like that. Like I'm looking through this, just laughing, thinking like I can't believe like that she was just taking notes, on the day, and they're still there in the house now.
that's funny. Yeah.
But it's almost like a diary in a way, but like it was really interesting because like big events that happened over the years in Brit, like you could read through those and like see big stuff. Like it was interesting.
So I'm hearing a part two to this podcast called Verla's Calendar with Nick, and
Some of that stuff though, like I said, it would you
we're just
probably
gonna pick a
can't talk
year and
about.
break down what was happening in Brit in 1994. We're gonna see who ticked off Verla, and yeah.
It's there. It's funny.
Oh man, what always cracked my dad up was when he would make her pizza. She always wanted the pizza docked hard. We had this docking thing that would put bumps in the dough, and that
Hmm.
supposedly my dad's like, it's just so that the sauce soaks into the thing more. But she always thought the harder you docked it, the more crunchy your pizza was. My dad's like, no, it's literally the crunch is based on how long you keep it in this 400-degree oven. It has nothing to do with this. little thing that you go back and forth on. And then my dad would always tease her. Um, was it Saturday night or Sunday night, 60 Minutes would be on. And they always had like a disease of the week or something. Like they highlighted some health issue. And your grandma would always be like, I have that. I know I haven't been feeling good. I have that. And my dad's like, Verla, it literally said on there that it kills every person within 24 hours that has this disease or something, you know. It's like, oh, I
That's
know
spot
I
on.
have.
She's definitely was a hypochondriac a little bit. I'm the same way, except like I'm too cheap to go to the doctor or anything for anything. So I just like it's a good thing. Like otherwise I'd be there all the time too.
Yeah, he would just give her a hard time. She's like, Verla, you are fine. Like, and she would just get all fret about it. And then it would lead to just teasing her. And I know, you know, and just move on. But,
She went on with me one time about MSG. And I'm like, maybe there's something to that, but you know, it was just funny how her take on it or whatever. And she was like, gotta throw away everything you have that has MSG. Check the label.
it's funny. And your grandparents, their generation, they kind of came into this like tech era, but they didn't want to be a part of that, and they just wanted to keep things the way it used to be. So they were kind of blissfully oblivious to a lot of things, and then they were just blunt and here's how it is, so we're sticking with it. And I love that about that generation of people. It's just like, I'm good. Like, I'm going to tell you how it is, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I'm old, so deal with it. I loved it.
My grandpa Jerry, even though he was getting pretty active there for a while towards the end on Facebook and stuff, though, like
Yeah,
he was like liking and smiling and different stuff like at things I would post or whatever. It was just cool to see him like logging in and engaging on there a little bit, you know.
yep, yep. Yeah, and speaking of him, as we're wrapping this up, he got to celebrate his 90th birthday and have a big party. Was it weeks before he passed? Just
It
not
would have
that,
been like maybe a month or so,
maybe a
or
month. So
a little more than that. My kids were actually in Britt. Each year they go spend a week with Angie's parents in Harlan, and they do the swap with my parents and come to Britt for a week.
yeah,
And we had a wedding that we were going to here in Michigan or whatever, and so we weren't able to make it back. But my kids were in Britt for it, which is cool.
yeah. My parents went and they said, "Oh, he had a blast. He was so happy to see people," and but he was exhausted. I mean, 90 years old. But they're like, he had a great time. We're so glad they made it, and Brenda and them were happy people like my folks could get there. And I wish I could have gone. I had kind of an open Facebook invitation to go. We had something going on, unfortunately, and then he passed away just in July, August, early August. When I can't remember exactly when he passed, but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it would have been like the first week in August, I think.
First week in August, yeah. So real sad to hear about that. Staple of my childhood and great guy. And just again, your grandparents meant a lot to me growing up, and obviously to you and your cousins and siblings, and just good people. And those are some people that I always think of when I go back home and drive by his place and drive by the old Mark's Pizza. So yeah. So we're gonna wrap this up. Thanks again to my 16 sponsors tonight. Coming up on the podcast, I have Lori Tlach, Amber Hejlik, all the state championship winning quarterbacks, and then Scott VanDusseldorp. And then hopefully I'll have 3 playoff podcast episodes. I've done those the last couple years with Jay and Kevin. I just got word from Jay and Kevin, though, that neither one of them are probably going to be available for the first one. So I might be doing one by myself, unless anyone out there is a high school football nerd in the state of Iowa and wants to jump on and help me do some predictions and talking about teams and stuff. Otherwise, it's going to be me talking, and it's not going to be real exciting. So hopefully we have a couple of those as we progress through another deep playoff run. And a reminder, I'm only doing podcasts about every 3 weeks now. My life is we're just busy all the time. So I need to scale back on how often I do these. And I thought it would be good for the longevity of the podcast to not, kind of burn out. So Nick, I always leave the end of this for any shout outs, people we forgot to talk about, things we missed, anything you'd like to say as we wrap it up.
Not really, man. I appreciate you having me on. I like I said, I tune into all of these or whatever. I really enjoy like what you're doing. I think it's great. I think keeping, Coach Sanger's legacy moving forward. Like I said, he impacted so many, students and athletes, and it's just, super cool thing that you're doing. And I love, tuning in. I'd always come back, especially if you wanted to get, you know, even a couple guys or a group of guys on, I'd come on anytime. Other
Or
than that, not really.
Verla's calendar. I think
Yeah, I mean, I can look into some of that. Brenda might have burned those things already. There's a lot of evidence and things said in there, but I was always wondering how come we should do some sort of like charity alumni football game or whatever and see who could get hurt the worst.
Oh, I will watch.
Yeah.
No. I just turned 37 a couple days ago. It would have to be like flag football, but power walking only would have to.
I just turned 42, and I feel like I'm about in as prime condition as I've been in a long time.
Yeah,
But just because I probably like beat myself up in my late 20s and early 30s, and then now I'm actually taking it serious. After I turned 40, I'm like, time to get healthy again.
Yeah, I just turned 37, and we're going to Hawaii at Christmas time to see my sister and her kids, and I'm down about 18 pounds in the month of September, and I've tried jogging a time or two, and I'll get about 80 yards on the track, 80 meters, and I'm like, nope, I'm just gonna stick to walking. Like I do that a few times. I'm like, at my age, I'm just glad I'm out here walking. I'm not doing all the other stuff. I can golf hobo days, hobo golf, and be sore for the next 2 days after just golfing in a 4-man. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, some kind of charity reunion, absolutely.
Well, I think that's kind of what the hobo day, like golf, is kind of like that, right?
Yeah, I don't want to see anyone die on Bob Sanger Field, so we'll.
It would definitely like some big injury, I'm sure.
Can you
some torn
imagine though?
ACLs.
Can you imagine the studs on there? Like if you literally just said, let's even have like an introduction at a halftime of a game of all the former all district or all state players. Oh my gosh, that would just be a who's who of studs. So
I'm sure we'd all remember. Like I said, the playbook back then was pretty basic, right? And I think like I'll never forget the plays ever in the wing tee. It's hilarious. We didn't talk about it earlier, but my son, his offense is the same.
Is it?
That's like what the high school runs. I mean, they have more of a variation, but it's their numbered backs are a little bit different. So like for me to teach him and the rest of the kids is super easy because of that. I mean, those wings or whatever, we double as wide receivers in our offense because they can split out, but same thing, like we're running 327, but we call it like Tiger Right, 45 blast or something, but it's same thing.
245 dive. Never go wrong with 245 dive, 242 trap. The fun part is like I'm going to the game Friday night up at South Central Calhoun. I'll find someone to stand next to that I know, and we'll just call out, all right, 245 dives coming up, 230. It's just fun we haven't played for 20 some years and we can still pretty much predict what's coming. So
is there anybody this year on the schedule that can really give them another run? They guess you got Newman at the end, right? Are they decent?
They're down. South Central Calhoun will probably be our best game. Lake Mills is 5-0, but they haven't played us or St. Ansgar yet. They're a lot better. Newman's kind of down this year, but they always have a couple athletes.
Can you lose one or two in the district or whatever and still make the playoffs? Or
top 4 makes the playoffs in each district. So
they're like they're basically you can't not be in. And I think they can beat anybody any given day. So
yeah. We're talented enough to win a state title. But on any given night in the playoffs, any round, you just never know. I mean, it's just one of those deals. But this game on Friday should be a good game. They're not doing the live stream, just radio, because the other team, South Central Calhoun, has NFHS recording, and so you have to they only give them the one option. You have to buy the game online from their company that they use. So it'll just be audio. So I'm gonna head up. My wife says I can have a little kid break, go to the game by myself and see some people. So I'll be up there on Friday night. Should be a good game. They're 4-1, we're 4-1. We're slated for a number 1 seed in the playoffs, even with a loss if we win on Friday. So it should be good. So, all right, buddy. Well, I appreciate you being on here. And like always, go Eagles.
Thanks, Dan.